start the recording? I usually don't start that till I teach, but I know the last time it got started a little late, so.
Yeah, I actually just gave you back host. So if you want to start recording right now.
That was quick.
Yeah. I'm all done.
Wow, you got better at this, huh?
I've gotten very good at this. As long as all the work's already done.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to stick around for check-in and then.
Okay. Yeah, I'll probably wait to start it closer to the time. Somebody got in early. Hi, RG Duval.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Yeah, I was having some issues there, but I'm in.
All right. Well, that's good. You got in. Often people aren't getting in early anymore, so.
Oh, okay.
But you get to see us do our little before we start things.
Okay. So, Chris, do you normally get many participants?
Well, I usually do, but now certain courses like this one have been going on for a few months. So then it tapers off somewhat until we have like a new surge of people joining, or we're pushed out to new facilities, then it increases again. So today's class looks like it's smaller. On Monday, my classes that were geared towards art one was pretty large and one was medium. So it just depends.
Oh, okay.
Did you take any other art courses before?
No, this is my first. So I'm kind of just waiting to see how this goes.
Good. Well, I'm glad you joined me.
Yes.
Do you know how to share your video if you would like to do that?
Actually, Chris, no, I am learning, so.
Well, I'll tell you how, and if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But if you roll your cursor down towards the left bottom corner, you'll see a little video camera with the words that say start video. And that's also right beside your mute or unmute little speaker.
Actually, I am.
If you're on mobile, it'll be at the top instead of the bottom.
Okay. Does it say share screen maybe?
No, it should say start video. What are you using?
A laptop.
So yeah, you should see it lower left, all the way over in the left corner on the bottom.
Okay, I do. I see it now.
Good.
Okay, but I don't want to share today.
Okay, well, just so you know where it is, that's where your mute is also. Welcome, everybody. We will get started in just a minute. I'll give some people some time to roll on into the class.
Okay.
It's a dreary, kind of cloudy day here in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it is here too. I'm in Maryland, and
okay. Yeah, then you have what you have.
And it's raining. Yes.
Support also said she's in Maryland, so we're all Eastern Coast people. I don't know where Patty's at, but we always have someone who says, "Oh, I'm in sunny Hawaii," or "I'm in sunny Arizona," and then like, okay, that's nice.
Patty's in sunny California.
Oh, see, there we go. Yay!
Wow. Okay.
That brings a little sunshine to our group.
Good.
All right, I am going to start sharing my screen. So you should be able to see my first slide, which gives you the title of today's class, Doodling to De-Stress. So hopefully we're starting to get less and less stress in our lives as things start to get better with this virus. That's my hopes for everybody. All right, so let me get my chat box open. If you have any questions, I don't mind if you unmute and ask me them as I'm teaching. That way I can answer it right away. If you are unmuted and there's any background noises or things we might hear, please remember to mute yourself. And I
Okay.
will try to keep an eye on the chat box if anybody has any questions. Also, Joanna from Get Set Up as one of our support people is here. And if you have any technical questions or specific to the class website questions, she would be able to help you. So as I said, welcome everybody. And if you're new, like I know one of our people is new to this, so welcome. And for those who are coming back, I'm glad you're returning. So this is a little example right here on my first slide of the type of doodling we're going to focus on today. We're going to talk about a little bit of everything to do with doodling, but this is one that we will walk through how to do because it is a focused way to help you have less stress while you're doing it. So my name, for those of you who haven't ever had me for a class, is Christine Hess. You can call me Chris. I live in South Central Pennsylvania, right near Harrisburg. And my background is undergraduate degree in art education, and then my master's in training and development. And I worked for 38 years in healthcare education. For 24 of them, I worked with children on the pediatric floor, so I got to use my art with them there. And then I went into patient education. I've also dabbled in a lot of other little sideline things to keep me occupied with things, you know, that I like to do besides main stuff. And one of them was antique business and environmental education with schools around here. So yeah, I like to do a lot of different things. And I love the idea of interacting with older adults and Get Set Up. When I found this and I started to take classes, I really liked the idea of the connection, especially the fact that we can talk to each other and see each other. So I've been teaching here since December and I really enjoy it. So we learn from each other, and ideally I can see you and you can see me, and I understand if you don't want your camera on, but I really appreciate if you do have it on. I can sometimes see you waving your hands or trying to get my attention. But like I said, if you want to talk to me and say, hey, Chris, I have a question, that's fine too. So this class is being recorded. If you would like a copy of it, you can email help@getsetup.io and they will send you a link to the recording. If you're watching on live stream, which I know we're being streamed right now, remember that the best way to participate is to join us and register for a class. That way you're here and we can see each other and talk to each other. Also remember that Get Set Up is not paid to promote any specific products. Today, what we're going to cover is that we're going to learn what a Zen Doodle is. And maybe some of you have heard of that, and maybe it's something totally new as far as what you've heard of. And then we're going to see how that doodling can help ease your stress. And then we'll walk through a process of me doing one that you can see it being created, and then you'll be able to do one on your own. And if you happen to bring along paper and pen, you can practice along as we're talking about it. And then I'll wrap everything up. So maybe some of you already doodle, or maybe some of you used to doodle, and I did. I remember very vividly during probably like 5th, 6th grade history classes, I did these sorts of doodles on the left-hand side. And that was what was in the margins of my notebooks when I was taking notes, because most likely in history, my mind was wandering and I really wasn't into it and it didn't excite me, but art did. So I doodled, and that's kind of the types of pictures and doodles and words I put in my notebooks. This one on the right-hand side is more of little icons. So icons are also referred to as little doodles when they're done, you know, in this small size. And I thought that was another good example. So the word origin, because I like to look up some of these things as far as history goes and where they come from. So the word origin actually came from Germany in 1935, And it was used back then in a way that it meant to scrawl aimlessly, which is what it means now. And it perhaps came from a dialectal doodle, D-U-D-L-E, which I think is still said the same way, doodle. And it meant fritter away time, trifle, or associated with dawdle, which is close to it. So those are all what has to do with that word, which I think is close to noodle and does sound like a lot of our Pennsylvania Dutch words here in Pennsylvania. And most of those words have an origin in German. So that was interesting to me. We still use some of the common Pennsylvania Dutch words in my vocabulary. For example, just yesterday, my mother had messy hair and she was talking about looking strubbly. And I bet no one else ever heard strubbly if you're from the other parts of the country, but that's based on Pennsylvania Dutch German origin. So that's why doodle and noodle, those kinds of words have that feel to them also. So when I was looking up some resources for doodling, I found this, and I thought it would be interesting to show you. Mr. Doodle, as he's become to know, because his little things he does are very similar to what I just showed you with those little icons. And it's really cool. He's done this quite a while and kind of has a following now. And even he designs fabrics and things like that. So this is really put in high speed, fast speed, but he's covering a whole wall here. And he just does these little doodles that are all connected and it fills in a complete pattern. So I thought this was fascinating. I just found this, I think yesterday. So if you did it that large, I'm sure it would take quite a while to do it. So here's a close-up of him doing it on paper, and he's using a fine point permanent ink marker, just like I'm going to talk about using. But it's really kind of neat, I think, how his style is so specific to what he does and how it connects together. So there you go. I thought we'd look at that as a sample. And then this was when I was looking at those word origins and some of the history. I found Egyptian hieroglyphics that really reminded me of doodles. And here on the left side, you see these tiny little icons and figures that looked at in a whole context, to me, looks like they were doodling. And there's even little scribble lines in here. I'm sure this was a communication tool that meant something to them with what they were saying to each other. Over here are some other examples. One is more on like probably a piece of papyrus paper or whatever it's called and done with sort of inks. And that has very similar little shapes and icons that are on the left side, same as this one that was carved more into like stone. So to me, these are ancient doodles, and I thought that was an interesting little thing. So what we're going to look at is called Zen Doodling. So first of all, what is a doodle? Well, the definition in the dictionary says it's an aimless, I'm having trouble talking today, sorry, an aimless or casual scribble, design, or sketch. And when you add the word Zen, which means peaceful and calm to the word, you get a Zen doodle. And Zen doodling is the art of drawing designs using structured patterns with focus of mind. And so what you're doing is really concentrating on how you're making these certain patterns within your paper, and your patterns on your spirals or your squares or whatever you're doing, you're really focused on that. So that's where you're getting that peaceful, calm state of mind, because you're not thinking of the other stressful things, hopefully. And I think just by doing it, you're pushing that out of your brain. And the nice thing is all you need is a pen and paper. You can use a pencil if you want to do some first little basic ideas of where you're going to sketch, but usually I go right from my square in pencil to using my pen. And these are examples on the right of ones that I did many years ago when I first found out about this. And the one on the left is one from a website that I found. So my little squares are only about 3.5 inches square. And that's what I use because I just like to do them fairly quickly. And I do use a permanent black ink Sharpie fine point. They are very easy to find. I actually find them at my Dollar Tree store. I saw they had a whole new shipment in the other day. I have some other permanent ink ones, but I like my Sharpie fine point just because it works so well and it doesn't bleed and it's nice and a fine tip on it. If you like to have different widths of tips, there's other brands like UniPen that make them different thicknesses, and then you could fill in the dark parts quicker if you have a thicker tip on it. So the one on the left I like because what you can see here is that they did these first lines that were spiral, kind of like octopus arms coming out from the center. And then they filled in all those spiral blank spaces with different patterns. So this one looks larger, more like I think 5 by 7 or 8 by 11, something like that, and probably took a lot more time. But when you're working on something like this and really focused on the creation of that pattern in that space, your brain is definitely focusing on that. So the longer it is, the more you're kind of in that Zen doodle state. And I like to show, you know, there's differences. You can do this in a very large format or you can do it in a small format. I like to carry my supplies with me when I go camping or go away. And so I carry things in like a smaller size to just be able to grab it and go. So is there any questions so far on any of that for the background? Okay, then we will go on. So this is the part where if you brought a pen and paper along or pencil, you can start to do this. And what I did here is save this little idea of a scribble. So this is something I also used to do in school. And I would just sit there and do, and I'm going to kind of trace around it so you see with my red ink here where I'm going and how I'm going. So the more you overlap it, the more you'll get shapes out of that. And I just kind of go around like that and then come back and connect it. So that's showing you what I did for that. And then basically you get this idea. And each of these spaces, you can work on filling a different design in. So if you do that now, as we go along, and I'm going to show you a lot of examples of different designs, you can fill that in. Another thing to do to practice would be to just trace circles on a paper. And you can use the same size circle if you want. In this one, I use different sizes and you overlap them. And wherever they overlap, you have these little spaces that are now made. And each of those spaces, you'll do a little different design in. And that is what gives you this whole concentrated focus of creating that design. So this is the process I'll walk you through in sort of a very smaller way, because this is one of those 3.5-inch squares. And I wanted to show you, you know, in a nice, quick, easy way, but you can take this, like I said, and make it as, you know, expanded as you want, a larger image. There's many variations that you can do with this. So on my small square, which is actually cardstock, somebody asked me what I use, and I like cardstock because it gives you a little more stability, and I had a lot of cardstock left over from when I did scrapbooking. So I cut these on a paper cutter. You could also just draw lines and cut them with scissors. And I made them all about 3.5 inches square, and I have a pile of them that I can just pull from and use one when I want. So that's what I used, was cardstock. And this is a piece of masonite board. Someone asked me what that was. It's just a very thin, if you don't know what masonite is, it's like a pressed board, and you can get it in the lumber section. I also use it for painting and other things, but I like it as a backing. It's similar to what they use on clipboards. If you see, they have clipboards in the dollar store too. And it gives you that hard backing to like just lean on and use as a surface to give you support. So that's what that is. And these two in the process are the only ones I used my pencil for. So I gave myself a very bold, broad letter H. And then I did these lines to divide it into sections. Now I could have overlapped some more and made it a little more small sections in there, but I just did a few that were not overlapping. They kind of go through the space. And then I thought each of these would give me a different area to fill in, because like I said, this is a fairly small one. So I don't get too minute in what I do, and I wanted you to see really the separation of spaces. Now remember, the goal isn't here to have like a beautiful finished product that you're going to frame. The goal here is that the process is what's important, and that you're focusing on creating it. And that then leads to de-stressing and relaxing. And I do have some learners who reported back to me that it works. There's one, Stephanie, she's one of my art learners that comes to my classes. She said she does this almost every day, and she really has found it helpful and relaxing. So even if you're sitting somewhere, you know, and you need to, so one of my examples that came to my mind is if I would fly, which I haven't flown in a plane for a few years now, but if I were flying, sometimes I get stressed. This would be a good thing to pull out and focus on doing, so that I'm not thinking about all the plane noises or the bouncing or whatever. It just gives you another concentrated area to think about instead of that other bad stuff. So here's the first one I then got out my little Sharpie fine point for and started to do. And I usually go around the outline on the outside edge. Sometimes I do these lines for separation. Sometimes I don't. I just leave the pencil line there. And that gives you a different effect than if you actually use the ink. So in this one, I did do the separation. And then I started to put patterns in the spaces. And the first one I did was this checkerboard. Now you'll see I did my lines very loose and free. I didn't do anything too specific with a ruler. I tend to just kind of like the flow and be more free with it. And then over here, I came and did some circles because I wanted to counteract the fact that these were lines and squares. And a lot of this just comes from my brain, and I'm thinking about what kinds of patterns can I make that are different. So people say, well, where do you get your idea for patterns? Well, I'm going to show you YouTube videos, but also remember that patterns surround us everywhere. So I'm here in a bedroom. I can look at the wallpaper that has flowers on. I can look at the carpet that has designs in it. I can see the bedspread that has some designs in it. So all around us, or even the keyboard with the squares gives you designs. You can see designs in almost everything around you, drapery, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind. If you're like stuck on what kind of pattern can I do, just look around you and get inspiration from what you see around you. So over here in the next step, what I did was then start to do some other patterns, but then I also think about how I want to have contrasting blacks and whites in my designs, just because it's fun to color some of those squares in and make some things more solid. So I colored in the checkerboard pattern. And then I think I did the arches here and colored every other arch in. And then I started to do these little squiggle lines, and I did this back and forth continuous line. So that's what I kind of went in that order and did. And then this is finishing it up. So remember, you can keep these just black and white, which I often do. So if I had done more to finish this in just black and white, I probably would have colored more of these little triangles in. Or I might have colored in some of these lines on this side. But because I knew I wanted to show you also how you can add color to it, I left more of these open with a lot of white space in it. So keep that in mind. That would determine if you just want to sit there and use your black pen and keep doing black and white, you're going to end up with a pattern that has a lot of those differences in it. So remember too, you can come up with many different textures and patterns, and sometimes some of them look more like textures than others, and it has like a three-dimensional feeling to it. So we're going to look at some of them on these examples here that I found on YouTube. And this is where you can get some really great patterns to try to copy in your designs, and you will get this link. I will send it to you after class. But you can also right now try to copy some of them. So this is really put in fast motion because she's showing 24 different patterns. And her pen that she uses here is, I think it's a uni pen. At one point you can see it. So that's another brand. There's a lot of brands that have the permanent black marker in, especially if you look in your scrapbooking sections or in the art sections. Now, in these examples, her goal, I think, is to show you how many different patterns she can think of with just lines. She's not doing too much filling in with any blacks. She's just using lines to show you the variation you can get. And as we watch a few of these, I'm gonna go through it a little quicker, but I also wanna say something about supplies. So I told you how they have Sharpies at the dollar store. The other places I know you can find some good supplies would be like a Tuesday morning. They have an arts and craft aisle and they often get scrapbooking supplies. Another place I found them is a place called Ollie's around here. You might not have them on the West Coast or mid area of the States, but it's similar to other places that are found throughout the country in that it's a bankrupt buyout place. It's called a bargain outlet. They buy things that fall off of trucks or places that went bankrupt. So their supplies change every week, but they have a really good arts and crafts aisle. And I've seen things in there that are good to get at bargain prices too. So those are some ideas. Of course, Hobby Lobby and Michael's, those kind of places with art supplies will have these types of pens. And your paper, you can just cut your own computer paper if you want. That works good too if you don't have cardstock. I know in some places like Walmart or even the craft stores, they have little bags of scraps they sell that must be ends from paper they cut, and you can get them pretty cheap and they're already cut in small pieces, or you can use large pieces too, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to start to go through this a little faster, and like I said, you'll get a sample of you'll get the link to this so that you can do this on your own also. I thought this was a good one because of how many different things she does with just lines. And we're going to look at another one where she does more with adding contrast to it, blacks and whites. That one looks to me more three-dimensional because she puts those lines in that looks like they're going down into a crevice and gives you more like a tufted cushion effect. Now that one
Hello.
she added dots to, so that's a little, different. You can get very, intricate with it. Now keep in mind, these squares are probably only about 2 inches square. So her goal was to show you samples that you can use those patterns in the things you're creating and just how many different designs there are. That's the one there to me that looks more three-dimensional, almost like stitching on a quilting, just how she did it with her irregular wavy pattern. And this circle one, I think, is the only one she starts to add some more darks in and put some coloring behind it, which gives you a different effect than if you just left it plain lines without the fill-in. And then her last one is just wavy lines, almost like landscaping lines. So that's the first link. And then the next one that you get to watch some more, I said that this is almost like hypnotic watching them, and there's a little bit of music box playing in the background. So when you watch it, it almost feels like it could put you to sleep if you weren't doing anything else. This sample I saved because she's much more specific with her lines being perfect, straight lines. I rarely use a ruler, but if you like more perfection and precision, maybe you'll want to use a ruler. And here again, I think she's showing lines that are very similar, but how many different things you can do with it. So again, we'll go through that. These squares are even smaller than the first one I showed you. I can just tell by that ruler. They look like they're only an inch large. And I'm sure that had to do with the fact that she's using a ruler, because it would take a lot longer to do larger squares. But you can see how much more she's using black fill-in to give you a different kind of design look to it. And there she did a solid one. So here she's stippling. That's called stippling when you're just doing dots. And you can do a lot with just dots too. You can make them close together or far apart, and it gives different effects. Same thing with lines. You can make the lines come close together or be far apart, and they give you a whole different feel for how dark an area is or how light. So we're going to start going through this a little more. And here's some more I thought that looked like stitching, because the way she does those lines, it's almost like she's using sewing lines to do that. And this is one where she does add a little bit of line into the corners on the second one she does, and it looks different. So even though there's some similar things to curved lines, they tend to have some differences to them. This one is similar to my snail shell type drawing where they're all little curly cues. I like that one. And this is the one with the little line added in the middle, looks a little different. So I thought these were good to look at too for some differences. And up here in the corner, she gives you what's coming up. I like that too. You might not see it as much as because I'm skipping over, but as soon as she's doing a new square up here in the right-hand corner, she tells you what it is and gives you, so here it's lines. And this is where I'm talking about the lines being closer together, giving you dark areas. And then when she comes out, they're also lighter. So that's a whole different feel to it also. So that's a very large variety of different patterns that you could use. Questions on any of that?
Chris.
Yes, go right ahead.
Chris, this is RG Duvall. My laptop just died on me, so I had to call in because I can't get back on. So now, is your tech support person? I think her name is Julia.
Yeah, the person who was here at first left because she thought everything was fine. So if your laptop died, the best thing right now probably would be to ask for the recording, and you'll get to see everything that you missed if you can't see the screen, because they record the screen too.
Can't. Okay, great, because I had to call since I can't get back onto the laptop. It's now saying the session has already ended.
Oh, I'm sorry. And the other thing is to go to the Get Set Up website and use the phone number or the help there, the help option, and they will tell you and try to help you with your gadget to get it to work. Okay.
Okay, great. All right, I'll just continue to listen.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry you're having trouble. Anybody
know.
else have any questions? No? All right, then we're going to continue on. So here's what I meant about adding the color. Think about it like now I made a coloring book page and now I'm going to color it. And because you're picking up your pencils, which I did pencil, you're continuing that focused process. And I'm still thinking about, where do I want to add my color? Where do I want to leave it white? You know, maybe I will add more blacks to it with my pen. That's all focusing on the creating process. And that is still doing what we want to do with that de-stressing and your mind focus. Just like I always say this is another example. If you recall, years ago, if you went through Lamaze classes for having a baby and giving birth, it was all about your breathing and focusing on something else so that you didn't feel pain. And it worked to some degree in some ways. And also, even when I worked with the children on pediatrics, I would use imagination and diversional activities to get them to not focus on what was happening with a painful procedure. So it's similar to that, in that if you're having stress and just bad thoughts that you can't get away from, and your anxiety is high, when you are focused more on creating, number one, I just think think it brings a little more joy to your brain. And number two, it's pushing out those bad thoughts. So that's what this is all about. So continuing on to do it with color is still making the process longer. Maybe you just want to sit down for 15 minutes. Maybe you want to sit down for an hour and do a large one and really get into it. It's all up to you and how flexible you want to be. You have that options. And that's what I put here about it. You can do it more or you can do less of it. You can do simple or ornate. And remember, it is the process in creating that matters the most. So then people say, well, what do you do with these, Chris, after you have them? So you can just collect them. I kind of have them in my pouch, and I'm going to show you right now my little pouch that I carry with me. This is a little dollar store pouch. I think it was a makeup pouch. It has a zipper on it and it has a handle. So if I'm going camping or if I were going on a plane, I could grab this with me and throw it in my bag. And then in here, I have my collection of squares. So you can see they're small, they're 3.5 inches, and I have quite a few of them that were cut. And when I do one like I did here, I just then put it back in my bag. So here's the one I did for an example, the H. And here's the one I showed you in the beginning. So I do kind of just save them and collect them. But we talked about with my other groups about what they could use them for. And they came up with a lot of different ideas, such as you could glue them onto cards and make a greeting card, a birthday card. You could decoupage them on a board if you wanted to hang like a wood sign up, or frame them like you put them together in a 3x3 square, so you'd have 9 of them together and have like a quilting pattern. A strip of them, if you did a strip with like 5 in a row, you can frame them. So there's a lot of things you could do with them that you can just be creative with if you want to use them for something. And then also the other things in my pouch, here's the Sharpie pen. I have a couple other kinds in here, but that's my favorite. And my eraser is one that I got at the dollar store. It's one of those that kind of has a cartridge eraser in it. And then my pencil, I have like a lead pencil in here. So that's my simple little grab kit that I use with my supplies on. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So here's some more of my examples. This one I just held up and showed you looks like this. I did the curved lines, and then from those curved areas, I added more curved lines. So it became very wavy and kind of 3D looking. I did add a little shading and color into it. And then these over here, I chose and put them all together for you to see the difference. Whereas this one, I left black and white. These other 3, I added color to them. And they all are on that small square size. So it's up to you what you want to do with them and how you do it. I look at it all as a very simple form of art therapy. And the other thing I forgot to say, I don't know how many of you have heard of Zentangles. If you've heard of the word Zentangles or look that up, it's basically this same thing, but they've copyrighted that term and they have a website. And they also provide supplies that you can buy and classes you can take. So there is Zentangling that's very similar to Zen Doodling. I also had another learner suggest that you could do this with your grandchildren and other kids. You know, if you Zoom with somebody else, maybe you're involved even with like a senior citizen center, a senior center. I've had a person tell me she does this with her senior center. So there's lots of places you could take this to share and do. And I think a Zoom would be a great way with kids that you are saying, okay, we're all going to take our little paper and make some sort of little sketch and do the design within the sketch. So here's then taking a little step further, other resources. I did a search for apps in case anybody wanted to see if there's something to do on their iPad or you could probably do it on your phone too. It would be much smaller. But this was the only one I found that looked very similar, and it was called Doodle Patterns. And they say draw tangles step by step, and it does cost money. So I'm pretty sure this is put out by the Zentangles people. And I didn't buy it, so I don't know for sure what it includes, but I'm sure It's similar to a book I have that I'm going to show you, where they give you all these samples and then they walk you through how to do some of them step by step. And they talk about supplies, and they might even show you, give you the opportunity to do it on your gadget. So that's one of the apps I found if anybody wanted to look that up. And then these are ones I found when I Googled Zen Doodles. So if you do Zen Doodles, which you can see I did a search for Zen Doodles on Google and go to images, what you end up with is a page full of different inspiration as far as patterns go. So that's a place you can look very easily. The YouTube that I showed you is another one, because YouTube does have a lot of videos on creating them and walks you through with a video how to do it. This one here I thought was interesting because sometimes you can find coloring books that have very simple shapes in them that aren't filled in with pattern, but then you could fill in your own pattern in the coloring book, especially if it's more like a children's coloring book. And they have them at the dollar store. Some of the coloring books already have these ornate patterns in, because then you're coloring. And coloring in itself is also very therapeutic for relaxing. But if you want to do the designs, look for patterns that are more open with lots of space in them. So that's the place you can look on Google, and those two I found. This one is done with the overlapping circles, as I mentioned in the beginning, and each place it overlaps has a section created that they put a different design in. And they're all very, kind of, well, here's the arches similar to what I did, but these paisleys and some of these other patterns get pretty intricate. So they would take quite a while to make. This one on the bottom also reminded me more of like a coloring book where you could fill in with patterns, because the landscape was probably just those solid lines and then they filled in with pattern. And then this one is an example from a learner that I had in my class, who's also a friend of mine, Stacy. And she did this while she was taking the class. And I thought it was a good example to show you how you can just start with some lines and start to fill in with different patterns. And she followed some that we talked about, like with the stippling and the curved lines coming together and making it darker. And this was unfinished, so she could have even gone further with coloring some of these squares totally black. So this just gives you an idea of one in progression, and I wanted you to see that. So here's another YouTube example of what I thought was similar to what I'm telling you you could do with coloring books, because if you don't want to do little squares, they do sell patterns you can buy in large shapes like on Amazon. But this was a very simple way of showing you what you can do in your own little book, your sketchbook, or on paper. So they talk about the supplies, which we already talked about, and then I'm going to let her start doing the design. And you'll see how she leaves larger spaces open instead of filling them in right away. So think about like coloring book. Some simple coloring book outline drawing. And then once she has those broader lines done, so she used a marker that made some broader, then she starts thinking about how she's going to fill in with some patterns. And this is where she speeds it up so you can see how she does that. And even within these patterns that she's making fairly large, you could continue to fill them in as she does with more and more lines. So you will get this link also as an example. But I thought that helps you see what you could do with coloring books if you get the right kind of coloring book. I know another idea was to get a date book and use each square for a pattern every day, even though they're little. You could practice with or you can get the larger 5x7 date books and do, a pattern every day in a different block. You could also get calendars and put them in the squares. So there's a lot of things that already exist that you can use this idea with. Okay, so that was the idea with coloring books I wanted you to see. Here's another one I found, and this was on Google when I plugged in coloring book patterns. You can sometimes get ones you can print out. So this would be an excellent simple pattern that you could print out and then fill in with your own designs with doodles. So that scribble I did in the beginning, this is an example of what a design would look like if you filled it in with pen. And see how much it kind of then creates that overall effect of having some areas dark and light. So this was done with my Sketches app, and that's on an iPad, and I'll share that with you. I use it to play around with, but I thought it was good for you to see this because you'll see how sometimes I like to put a thicker, bolder design against a very dainty, lighter design. It just gives you that contrast and difference. And whereas this stippling and this point design might be very quick to do, when you get more involved with this one, it could really take you a long time to do that complicated one. Or even these arches, rainbow patterns take a little longer than just your straight lines. So there's such a variety of patterns you can come up with. This is the app, if anybody's interested in what I use, because I use it for other things too. A lot of it's playing around. I do prefer still to use my pen and paper and paints and sketching on real paper, but the iPad is a place I go to when I want to do quick ideas or certain things. So it's called Sketches and it's free. It's made by Tayasui, and yes, they do make it for Android too. I've had this for years and years, and I have an iPad mini, an older one, number 2, so it's pretty old. And I have a basic stylus. I don't have anything fancy like an Apple Pen or an iPad Pro, and it has worked very well for me. So that's why I like it. You can upgrade and pay a little more and get more fancy tools. But if you get the free ones, you still have some of these basics. And you can see how you have different pens, watercolor brushes. I use it for a calligraphy tool to practice. So there's some fun things on there to do with that app. And I thought there was people who wanted to know what app I use. And that's the name of it, Sketches. Questions? Okay, so for more information, here's a book that I bought probably 10 years ago, and it is a Zentangles book. It has about 20 pages in. It's written by Suzanne McNeil, who is a certified Zentangle instruction. That's what that stands for because she took certain classes, and I think it's a certain amount of hours you take. But it does give you the basics like supplies you need and the process for doing it. I bought just one when I first discovered this, and then ever since then I've been out on my own, just experimenting and finding other resources, because back when I first bought this, it was not an electronic thing that you could really find a lot of things about. So that's become much easier to find. So even on Pinterest, I don't know if anybody's on Pinterest, but I saved a lot of my art inspiration and ideas on Pinterest. And you can plug in Zen Doodling here and find different resources or ideas for patterns. So here is my board where I saved a few things to show you. So if you're on Pinterest, you can plug in Zen Doodling, and these are the kinds of ideas you get. So here's one on all these different patterns that gives you a sample of what you could then mimic. Or here's another one that shows you almost similar to how we did the scribble. That's a black and white pattern. So I thought that was a good resource. In case any of you already are on Pinterest, I find that's a really good resource. And you could plug in and search for it. Or once you look for them, then they give you all these other different places to go and find more. So that's Pinterest. So you have YouTube, Pinterest, and Google are all excellent places to look. And if you want books, Amazon has bunches of them. I found this one when I searched for Zen Doodles. It's called Zen Doodle, Tons of Tangles. And it's a paperback with a lot of different references in too. So those are all the places you can find for more information. Anybody else have any questions related to the Zen doodling?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I just getting here, but I used to do this all the time. I used to love it. For some reason, I stopped. But I have a book. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, it's hard to see when you use a virtual background.
Okay, I did the virtual background thing yesterday.
It makes it very, that's why I don't use them anymore, because I often show things. So now we can see you, Noreen. Go ahead.
I did that class yesterday.
Yeah.
This is called the Zentangle Untangle Workbook, and I got that from Amazon. And this is one of the things I did.
Wow, that's nice.
So I took this because I want to get back into it, because it's so much fun and it's so relaxing. So
good. I'm glad you're here to give us testimony about that, because I forget things too. It's like I don't pick something up for a long, long time, and then I'm reinvigorated to get back to it. So
yeah, it's lots of fun.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing that too.
Okay, you're welcome.
Anybody else questions or comments? All right. Well, in summary, remember that doodles are aimless or casual scribbles, designs or sketches. I like that you can be aimless. Isn't that nice? You have permission to be aimless. Just nothing in your mind except to have some fun doodling. Zen doodles are structured shapes and patterns that you can draw, and drawing Zen doodles can help you focus your brain, relax, and de-stress. And I thank you for sharing your hour with me in this class. And if you want to share it on your social media, that you put up a picture or something, you can tag it with Get Set Up's tag. You can email Liz at getsetup.io. She sometimes interviews our learners and puts pictures in her blogs about what they're doing. There's the help at getsetup.io email in case you do need help or you want a recording. And then the related classes I found coming up are Social Hour Meditating Together, an interest group on Laugh and Reminisce that I put down twice because I meant to copy another one, but that one showed up twice. And then my next classes are the Art of Collage and Torn Paper and Introduction to Calligraphy. After this class, you'll get notes in an email that will have those same main summarized points in it. It'll give those ideas for classes, and there'll be a link that says give feedback. So if you could give us your feedback, we really appreciate it. They ask you to rate the session from 1 to 5 stars and type any comments you want there, or give us suggestions for maybe other classes. I look at all my comments, so I really appreciate if you take the time to share that. And remember that if you are interested in doing some sort of teaching or interest group, you just have to let them know at that email, because they're looking for people who want to share their passions and their ideas that they have. So you could let them know that. And we are growing because we are becoming more associated with a lot of community organizations, such as assisted care facilities or senior centers. So we are also offering classes that are new all the time. So watch out for that. Does anybody need any help for any of the things related to the website? It's been up and running now with a new look. This is the 4th week. So I think a lot of people have adjusted and gotten more familiar with it and like a lot of things about it. There is a class for introductory things you might want to know. There's also a class Marv teaches on getting used to the new look. So those are things you might want to look up. Did you have a question, RG?
No, not at this time. I will actually see if I can get back onto the laptop for the next meeting.
Okay.
Hopefully I will.
Yeah, if you can get through to the support people, they should be able to help you do that.
Okay, I will.
So the easiest way, so see here where it says on the website, need help. If you click need help, they give you 888 numbers to call, or you can chat with them right away. And so those are some really easy things to do. Here's a direct support button to do, or these call numbers. So that's right on the main page. Like I'm on the main homepage for Get Set Up, and that's right there if you click Need Help.
Okay. I said I'll definitely try to get in there. So next time I can see all of it.
Yes, I hope that will be so. And you should be able to get a recording too that you can watch it.
And how do you get
Okay.
recording? How do you get recording?
You send the email to help@getsetup.io and say, I would like a recording of the doodling class that was held on Wednesday and this date.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And when you're on the
Okay.
website, one other thing that's really nice to know is, say you're looking for other classes that have to do with drawing or art. If you just type in a word in the search, other things pop up. So there's the doodling one we just did. Here's my other class that has to do with basic drawing. And then that tells you when it is and how to, you can just click in that you want to register for it. Now I'm not logged in, or it would say register. The other nice thing
Okay.
they added on this site is if you go to About the Guide, you see my name and my bio, but there's also other classes I teach. And when you click that, you'll see all the other classes that I teach and when they're being held. So if you want to take another art lesson, you can find that too. If you
Okay.
want to, yeah, if you want to do an iPad one because you need more help about iPad and you type in iPad, you can come up with a whole lot of different iPad classes too.
Okay. Great.
Okay,
All right.
All
Well,
right.
Chris, thank you so very much.
you're welcome.
I
I'm glad
I
you
enjoy-
came, even though you couldn't see it. Like I said, come back for another one and watch your recording, and we can all sit around and de-stress together again.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.
and
Is there
have a
any other
great-
questions from anybody else? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Have,
Thank you, Chris.
have some
You
fun
too.
doodling. Yes, you're welcome.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Take care.